But it's exciting.
Okay, welcome everyone. We will call to order our Committee of the Whole meeting. And we'll start by recognizing that we are meeting today on the unceded traditional territories of the Sishat and Hupachesset First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to add from councillors? Seeing none, any late items from our corporate officer?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have a late item, which is the terms of reference for the City of Port Alberni Official Community Plan, Representative Team document. That'll go under E1.
Sorry, we just had a little bit of technical difficulties here. We're adding that just as an additional item to E1?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Seeing no additional items, would somebody like to move approval of our agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And we have minutes from the meeting held at 6 p.m. on April 25th, 2023 as presented. Moved to adopt by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Dame. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. No delegations, no unfinished business, so we'll move on to staff reports. And our first...
Why does it keep doing this? I'm trying to open the agenda.
We're going to work on Councillor Haggard's noise. But we'll move on to staff reports. The first item we have is our official community plan update, and we'll go to our Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Council. So tonight before you, we're just providing a bit of a progress update on our official community plan and some upcoming engagement work. So as Council may recall, Council supported back in December a vision and touchstones, or which are guiding principles for our official community plan, and that has helped us move forward. These guiding principles will help, again, as guide what some of our policy work will be going forward. Also, Council at the end of January received and supported our engagement strategy, again, towards the work of the preliminary policy development phase of our OCP. So we're just in the very early stages of that. We are a little bit behind schedule where we'd hoped to be, but we are beginning to move forward now. Why did that? Okay. And I'm out of sequence with my slides. Okay. Okay, I've missed a slide, but that's okay. One thing I did want to talk about in our engagement strategy is that the purpose is to who will be involved, to what extent the involvement of engagement will be, how will we report our results back, and how are we being successful? And if we feel we're not being successful, one component or another, you know, what sort of changes might we need to make? So even though we've adopted an engagement strategy and are moving forward with that, if as we go through the process, further changes seem to be need in order to meet our targets, we will certainly be open to doing that. Just to go over our roles, and just so you know, I'm kind of missing every other slide, it appears, on the PowerPoint. So, Council, you may find me a bit out of whack, and but to catch up here, on the project roles, City Council is the legislated decision maker on a new official community plan bylaw. Council will be updated regularly, and we're going to work on improving this as this update was delayed further than we wanted to be. Although Marianne Wade is no longer our manager of development services, she is still assisting on some project work, including our official community plan. As per the engagement strategy, we have what's called an OCP project team, and that is a team of staff people who are internal, cross-departmental, so engineering, parks, a variety of different departments to help advise on our process and provide technical information both to our consultants that are helping us out as well as members of the public as we move forward. We also have what's called a community representative team that was part of that adopted engagement strategy by council. And I will provide a bit more detail on where we are with that and how that is going to work. Okay. This is the schedule that was presented in January. I do have to say that we are behind in this schedule for a variety of different reasons. We are still looking to have a draft OCP document after a number of steps to council in November of 2023. We will adjust that schedule if need be, but there will be a lot of steps with the public between now and that draft document ever coming forward. So as part of the community representative team, some criteria was developed by our OCP project team to determine what goals for the representation we wanted to see from on our community representative team. And we were looking for a diverse of perspectives and demographics from the community to balance between the economic, environment, arts and culture, and the social sector. We also invited to have the Sashat and Hupetchet First Nations involved in this one, separate from the separate Indigenous engagement strategy. We were looking for between 12 and 15 people to sit on this group. As part of determining this group, we did direct invitations and a call for expressions of interest in late February to March. We did social media posts, newspaper ads. We posted on our Let's Connect page and our Let's Connect subscribers. We also did direct emails to 75 community organizations and outreach to the schools or North Oran College. And those are just a couple clips you see of what that advertisement was. The community representative team profiles have been attached to the staff report that's part of the committee or report that was to the committee tonight. Please note, since that time, we have one confirmed and a potential second in our youth profile category. When we published it, we hadn't been successful, but we now have one confirmed and potentially a second member to get that demographic to be as part of this group. We did have a preliminary orientation for the members who were selected for this group, and they agreed upon terms of reference for the community representative team, and that was as attached as a late item to your committee meeting tonight. I do want to be clear, the community representative team, they're not decision makers on the OCP. Council is the decision maker on what the final OCP looks like. The responsibilities of the community representative team is really to help promote the OCP process and engagement. So get out in the community with their networks and try and promote how the community can be involved. They will help advise and provide input into this process, and we'll work with our OCP team to strategize on future development policy work. Some upcoming engagements. So the community representative team will be having a weekend workshop coming up on May 27th and half a day on the 28th. If council, this is meant to be a community workshop with this group. That being said, if council would wish to attend in an observer-type status or to be involved, we'd be pleased to make that offer and provide council with the background information on that session. We are designing separate sessions for our school-aged children. We did that fairly successfully with the Visions and Touchstones, and we look to continue that going forward. And then there'll be more general public engagement in mid-June or end of June, and that'll involve public open houses, potential pop-up sessions throughout the community. And this is, we haven't even started developing any policy work yet. What we're asking is, we've done some background work on potential growth scenarios. We know over the next 20 years, the population is going to increase in the community. So how are we going to manage that increase? What types of housing should we look at? Where should the density potentially be considered? So that is one type of question we're going to start to begin with. And then also support for climate action. What's the level of support for climate action? What that might look like. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at this early stage. We will bring back a staff report to a future committee of the whole meeting, again, to say, here's what we've heard in a preliminary way. And we'll do that before we start the policy development. And we'll work on that policy development through July and September. And then we'll come back to both the community and the committee of the whole or council to say, here's some of the draft work that we've started with. We are beginning or have begun a separate Indigenous engagement strategy, and that is more intended to deal directly with both the Hepetcheseth and Shashot Council at their administration, directly with their communities in a meaningful way. So again, we will report back what we've heard to the nations and to the public and to council. As we've been leading up to this, we have been working on a number of background documents to help inform the public and our community representative team, and they involve a number of 7 touchstones snapshots. So in other words, the touchstones or the guiding principles that have been agreed upon, what's important in that topic area? What's the current situation in Port Alberni? And so those are hoped in order to help provide information to the community in order to then, okay, how do we work with that? How do we deal with those particular guiding principles as we move forward? We've also done some preliminary population and housing and integrated climate action work, and again, to help inform the discussion going forward on those pretty lofty projects. We will also work on the reconciliation snapshot with the 2 First Nations themselves. And that's a very high level input about where we are and how we're going to move forward over the next several months. Again, that's just the beginning of consulting with the community council and our community representative teams on what things we need to be considered as we start developing policy work. And then we will come back out to all these groups again in the fall prior to even drafting an OCP bylaw, which then has additional steps. And I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Douglas.
Thanks very much. The community representative team, I just had 2 questions. One, the workshop on the 27th you mentioned, is that a public event or strictly an internal with the team itself?
It's not open to the general public. This group was intended to be somewhat representative to help guide the process going forward. Mm-hmm. So they are all members of the public in various groups. Yeah. So it's not open to the general public for that one. It's meant to be a fairly intensive situation. So then they can go out and talk to the general public, and that will help inform some of the more open general meetings that we would have.
Thank you. And how many members do we have again?
part of the staff report, and I'd have to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 13 prior to the one youth, so we're up to 14 right now. And there's room for maybe 1 or 2 more.
And are their workshops facilitated by our project manager?
They'll be facilitated by our project manager, our consultant will assist, and some staff will be there as well.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dane.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm just curious what the age range for a youth member of the committee would be.
18 to 25 was the target. And then, of course, separately from that, we'll be going into the elementary school, into our school system. Because you need to engage with younger people, people, school-age people in a slightly different way.
Thank you. I have some concerns, I guess, about, when we originally received this, it did talk about 2 high school aged youth specifically being a part of the CRT team. So it sounds like that hasn't happened. We potentially have 1. However, there's already been an orientation without that 1, certainly without 2, and terms of reference have already been developed. So it feels to me like we're going to end up in a position where we have this CRT team over here giving the input, getting all the information, and then we're going to either bring youth in late in the process or we're going to bring them in differently, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not the intent of what was originally adopted. The original adoption of the breakdown of who would, of how this committee would be formed had 2 high school aged youth right in the middle of it. Not noted that, that they would be separate and not actually working as a part of the CRT and not getting the same information necessarily, not being able to be a part of the same conversation. So I guess I'm a bit concerned that we are proceeding forward even though we don't have those 2 youth spots filled, and that it sounds like it's going to be a parallel process rather than them actually working as a part of the team.
I do know the one member who is a female, and she's 18, so fairly young. So I'm not sure if she's currently in high school, but she's very close to that. When I talk about a separate school program, I was thinking of the younger kids, like middle school or those kinds of school programs.
So the actual CRT team is in, like, the report that we received in January says 1 19 to 25-year-old young adult, 2 high school aged youth. So we don't have 2 high school aged youth, but we're moving forward with this work anyways. So I guess to me, it's really important that we have youth involved in this process and from the start, not coming in after the fact. So I know it's sometimes more difficult to get youth out. However, we have had really good engagement from a few very involved teachers who have specifically identified to me students who they know would like to be involved. So if we're having a hard time getting youth to come out, then maybe it's personal reach outs to those teachers to look for more opportunities. Because I don't want to see this work proceed forward when we don't have the original intended makeup of the team.
And we will certainly reach out to further engage that. And if we need to slow the process down to ensure that they're caught up, we can do that.
Okay. Councillor Solda.
As we talk about some of the members here, Madam Mayor, the senior sector is missing out of here. I mean, obviously there's seniors involved, but where I'm going with it is that they're representing others, like social sector, the transition. There's nothing that says seniors, and I believe that they should also be part of the team somewhere. I know we could do that with the whole of our community, but I think it's important.
And there is a fine line about how large you make a group like this. And I guess what I want to be clear about is the community representative team is just a small one aspect of our engagement, our overall engagement strategy. So it's not, those other groups will certainly be reaching out to engage with them. And it's just, you do try and find a balance between the sectors, the demographics, and we do the best we can.
And I understand that, but it's just we have a lot of seniors, and they, of course, will have no problem giving opinions and stuff like that, but I just think that they should have been included representing the seniors, since we have different sectors of our community, and that's one big one that's missing.
I don't want to speculate on people's ages, but I think we might have seniors covered on this committee. Just, I feel like we're okay. I think who we are missing is youth. We do not have youth currently. Based on the profiles we have in front of us, we don't have youth on this committee who have been included at this point. Understand that we don't have a specific seniors representative. But as well, I'm personally looking back to what council approved. And so council did specifically approve something that said 1 19 to 25 and 2 high school age students. So for me, I don't want the process to move forward if it is varying from what council has approved. And certainly if we're moving forward without that full composition. So I think if it ends up slightly delayed as a result of making sure we have the right people in place, that's important. Councillor Solda.
I'm sorry to harp on this, Madam Mayor. It's just that the committee that's been assigned here, Uptown Merchants Association, T-Shot, et cetera, they're representing that part, like the T-Shot's representing land use planning coordinator, but there's nothing that's representing seniors. Yes, there's people that are older on the committee, but they're not representing the seniors.
I guess I do want to be clear. We're asking them to represent the community. When we went out there, we tried to get a broad spectrum of people who had different levels of interest. But that was part of the spectrum was choosing as much as we can and the different levels of ages. And so we aren't asking them to say, just because you are an Uptown business person, that's the only thing we're asking you to consider. A lot of these people, some of them have been in the community a very long time. Some are very, very new to the community. So we're asking them to bring all their life experiences to this, not just be representative of one particular segment. We all have different parts of our lives, and it makes us up who we are. So I guess I want to be clear that just because they might have a particular aspect, we're not asking them to limit their participation or their thoughts just to that. And I do understand the mayor's concern. I am pleased that we have two youth, and we will endeavor to engage with the high school for sure.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Scott, did you say that council would be invited to observe this workshop?
It's something that we could make that available to council if council wishes.
Could you ask a staff member to send us out the details? I would really appreciate that.
We most certainly will do so.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I listened with interest to the comments made by other members of council previously, and I think that perhaps the decision that was made in January may have missed something. And now that I look at the individuals, and not the individuals, but the composition of individuals on the CRT, I think that Councillor Solda's comments have some weight to them, in that in developing an OCP, we are developing it partly for a community as a whole, but also partly because that community as a whole has certain sectors in it that need to fit together properly, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And I do recognize that the community of seniors in our community is a significant one, may likely be a growing one, as I understand the recent demographic statistics. And particularly seniors in and of themselves will have different needs or concerns in the development of the OCP to ensure that there is a proper interaction between that specific demographic and the other demographics that we have represented within the context, as Mr. Smith pointed out, really this is representing the community as a whole, but these are the pieces of the puzzle in the whole. So I wonder if seniors might not be an important part of that. And I would make a motion that we add one position for a seniors representative to the CRT.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. And this is just a recommendation to council because we are in a committee of the whole, but certainly we'll take that. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll speak on the motion then. I think typically what happens in this community, if we're looking for certain people from certain groups, I mean, when you talk about seniors, I think of the Sunshine Club right away. So if we have somebody that's on this list that's already part of the Sunshine Club, I would assume that would be good. We're looking for students that are active in leadership. We go to ADSS leadership. So I would hope that we would go right to the leadership class. The only problem that I see with that, it is May 15th. There's only about a month left of school. So whether the students will be involved or want to be involved or willing until the new school year, don't know about that. But again, I would just suggest that if we have somebody covered, and I do understand the conversation here, but I do look at the group, and I think what would really work best if we just looked at the people without the titles. And then we go, okay, yes, this person, I can trust this person. And I'm thinking just without picking out somebody, Mr. Gunn, perhaps, all right? He's gonna be a fine representative of this community in a lot of aspects, including not just the environmental aspects. So as much as I understand the motion and the recommendation, I would suggest that if somebody already is on the Sunshine Club or has got ties to Sunshine Club, I would assume that they would be already there and represented.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
And I just wanted to let you know that I'm kind of getting text as I go through here. So I can confirm that we do have youth from the high school and that we have a member of the Sunshine Club who is part of this group.
Thank you. And 2 youths or 1 youth?
We have 2 youth. I know we have at least 1 from the high school.
Okay. And really my comments are just around that is how council approved it specifically. And it doesn't have to be high school, it was high school age. Because I think we have to take into consideration alternative learning in the community as well. My concern is just if we've deviated from what council approved and proceeded. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So not directly with regards to the motion on the floor, but with regards to the composition of the council, I simply cannot pass up the opportunity to say I'm happy that we have 2 youths.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, so there is a motion. It is to change the composition that was previously approved in January, and it would just be a recommendation to council. But if there's no more comments, then I will call the question on that now. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. So we will start recruitment process for 1 additional member. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, through the chair, I'd just like to also state that, through this process, we will be engaging many of the different demographics in other ways. And if there is a group out there that has a large membership and would like us to come and have a conversation about the OCP, we can gather that information in that manner too. Again, this is, council has to make sure they're good with the whole OCP and how we're moving forward. This CRT group is just one avenue that we're using at this time.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Dame.
Thank you. Through the chair. So when I look at this again, I don't want to make assumptions much like the age assumption. But I can't help but notice and I don't mean necessarily only this, but there's not a whole lot of racial diversity. There's not, I'm assuming I don't see any immigrant representation here. And I realize that we don't want to just continue to add further, spots on the team, but I recall a conversation I had with a member of the local Sikh community where he really expressed to me the desire from their community to have more representation within the city staff, within the decision-making process. And I'm sure that you know, that there are only one community group that feels that way, of one of many. And I'm just wondering if there's other ways that we can engage some of these groups that are feeling like they don't have the voice in the community that they would like to have, but don't necessarily feel connected through a lot of the channels that many of the groups that we're reaching out to have. So that's just a bit of a concern that I have that I felt I should express. So thank you.
Thank you. And Scott, maybe you could speak to kind of more what the underrepresented groups' work looks like, because I know it's noted in the original January report, but yeah, there's a comment in here about monitoring and engaging with underrepresented groups. There's a few specific ones mentioned, but maybe we could talk about additional outreach that we're doing.
Sure, and as we become aware, like I indicated, if we feel we're missing a particular group, that's where I think we need to go outside of the current adopted engagement process to see if we can't engage with those particular groups, whatever group that might be. So please have, if you are aware of something like that, please let staff know. We can make efforts to ensure that we try and reach those groups that aren't currently engaging with. You know, part of the challenge we had in our first round was directly engaging with youth and school-age children, and we made really strong efforts and went out of a normal process to do that. And so we're going to continue to do that. And if there's other groups that we feel we're not catching, let us know. We will make those efforts to do so.
Thank you. I just want to say that I think a part of this conversation is that council is looking at the group of people who have been selected for the CRT, not having full backgrounds, not having, being able to look and say, yes, someone is representing the Sunshine Club. And I guess my question is really just around that we do have a standard process for council approving committee members to all of our committees. We do that in camera. We talk about that in camera so that we're able to speak more freely as there's individuals involved. And I guess I was caught off guard when this came to us with decisions already made, rather than this coming to us in camera for council to review applications that were put forward. I did read back to the January report and watched the committee of the whole meeting as well. And it wasn't said that this would not be a process that would come to council. So I understand, you know, possibly just a lack of understanding or communication between council and staff at that time and how that process would unfold. Certainly not happy with any, or not unhappy with any of the committee members who were chosen. I think we do have a good cross-section of our community, as long as we do make sure that we have the youth that were originally committed as a part of what council approved. But I think this would have been probably an easier process without council changing it at the very last minute and adding a member. Had it gone through our normal process, which would be for council to have the opportunity to have these discussions in camera.
And I apologize for miscommunication on that. The intention was this would be a very informal community group and not a formal committee of council. It was really just a small component of our engagement strategy. So I apologize to the committee for that misunderstanding, that it was never intended to be a formal committee of council. In that regard, it's very limited in its scope and its ask. So.
Okay, thank you. I think every part of the OCP is so important. So anyways, I'm glad we're proceeding with this work. Glad to hear we have youth. Glad to hear we have Sunshine Club members, and maybe one more coming. Are there any other questions? Or I know that we have a late item, which is the terms of reference for the committee. Did we want to review the terms of reference? Maybe our corporate officer?
Through the chair, I can quickly speak to the terms of reference and why we brought it as a late item. And then if further questions, I think I would refer to our Deputy CAO and Director of I forgot the last part of that one. Anyway, sorry about that, Scott.
Director of Development Services and
Yeah,
Deputy
development
CAO.
service. Yeah. I got it backwards. As soon as I started talking, I got it backwards. Anyway, I'm sorry about that. But the reason why we added the terms of reference, just to show council and the public that some thought did go into it and actually lay out what this team was going to be doing. And it is an administrative committee. And we just thought it was important for everybody to see each aspect of it. So it is laid out like a typical terms of reference, and it talks about all the different pieces of that. But for specific questions, I would defer to Scott on that.
Thank you. And we do have that included as a late item. Are there any questions or comments from councillors? Okay, seeing none. We do have a suggested motion here, which is just to receive the update. Would somebody like to move that? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. And I did want to just offer before, I mean, this is just receiving the report, but there's not a formal opportunity for members of the public to speak here, but if any members of the public would like to provide input on the report that we've just heard before we move on to the next one, we would welcome them to come up. Okay, come on forward.
Hello, my name is Charlene. I just have a question about Indigenous. And what exactly do you refer to as an Indigenous person in your report?
It's a member of one of our local First Nations, or someone of Indigenous heritage.
What exactly is Indigenous heritage in your estimation?
I think that's outside of the scope of the current discussion for the day. Thank you. Did you have an additional question?
Wikipedia states that Indigenous is descendants of the earliest known inhabitants of an area. I know many people that live in this city that have, been born here and have grown up here and would be considered Indigenous. I just wanted to put that.
Point of order.
Just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Anderson.
Complicated, isn't it? Thanks, Councillor Solder, for bringing up the seniors issue. I seem to think every time we bring up seniors here, it hits a block. And there's other associations that are totally involved in seniors issues besides the Sunshine Club. And I'm not putting them down by any means. I'm sure there's lots of good delegates that could be a member of that committee. But there's teachers, municipal employees. They deal specifically with seniors issues and retirees, from retirees right through. And sometimes you might find that they have a value interest in being a member of these committees. Besides, it's always focusing on the sunshine. And I'm not. They do wonderful things. I'm not in any way putting them down. So I'm glad it was brought up. And I guess the question that I have, I'm not sure if you have to ask a question right here or not, but do we believe, or do you believe as a council, that seniors are being properly represented in this community? And the reason that arose when it wasn't a consideration on this committee, youth and everything else, it encompasses all the various age groups and did not encompass seniors. Like we're on the way out. Never mind the rest. Our input isn't valuable. You get that impression. I don't believe that's where you're coming from, but nevertheless, sometimes that's the impression you get. So do you think that overall this community is properly representing seniors? And I'll just thank you if you can give me that answer.
Thank you. I'm not sure we could answer that question today here. I think that's a very broad question and not necessarily really specific to the debate that we had. However, I will just add that I think based on the comments that we heard, that the people who felt that we didn't need to add an additional member to the committee were basing that on the fact that there was already a member of the Sunshine Club and multiple other people who are probably in the seniors age group. So not to say that we can't have one more, but I think on this committee, they certainly are well represented. Thank you.
Hello, Lisa Port Alberni again. It went really fast on who were part of the, what did you say, CRT or whatever? I didn't see who the representatives are, like what groups they come from. I know you're looking for the use. Am I doing something wrong?
No, you're doing something. Apologize, Madam, through the chair. I was going to suggest that after everybody was done was if I could list it off, the people who are on the committee, because it's not up there, and it would be for the video. So if that's what, do I have a second? Can I do that for you?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to know, because I'm
Yeah.
listening, but I'm not knowing exactly how you got to who exactly it is representative, and you say that there's minority groups, like,
Yeah.
I don't see somebody from the, that has disabilities, so, or like he said, the Sikh. So I just wonder how you got to deciding who those people are.
Sure.
And exactly what categories those are in.
Sure. So thank you for that, Councillor Mealy. So I just want to speak to process here. First of all, the makeup of this team was approved in January.
Okay.
At that point, then that's gone out, calls to the public. And then council is now seeing the people who were chosen. So we did not choose who would be on this team today. We're receiving this report today.
Okay.
Based on the criteria that we put out at the meeting in January that council supported at that time. But if we want to, maybe I'll just go to Scott, and if you could just kind of highlight who is on the team.
Like the categories of what you picked, like you said you were very important about the 2 youth, which that's great. But I also see Cindy say that there's a lot of seniors and then there's only one for a senior. So I'm just trying to understand where the categories come from and what that's about.
Sure, Scott will let you speak to the categories.
Sure. So as the chair indicated, there was some representation of various groups that we tried to advocate, but also there was a matrix involved about trying to have diversity of gender and age when we went to selecting the people that were part of this group. So.
Right, and I guess I just want to know what those are, like what groups you decided to put in that.
So it was some groups representing social, environmental, cultural, economic, those types of categories, or people who have an interest in that, whether they were part of a group or had an interest in that when they applied. And then also looking at a gender balance of the people who had applied, and an age, as wide an age spread as we were able to find amongst those groups. So we didn't try and pick all people in their 20s or all people in their 30s or all. So we tried to spread that demographic out as well as the categories out as well as, but some specifics are around youth and around First Nations.
Okay, because I wasn't sure if you guys had already discussed what, as a community as a whole, what that means and what categories would you pick as meaning the community of the whole, because there is so many, and how you got to that process of eliminating. Was there a lot of people that applied for that?
We did have quite a number of applicants, probably 2 to 3 times the number that were selected.
Okay, so is there like an approximate number around? I'm just curious to see who's engaging and who, like if there's lots of engagement or if there
Thank
wasn't.
you. The report said it was in the mid-30s of applicants that we have. So that's how many applicants we received. And I think, as it's been said today as well, this team really just makes up one structured portion of the OCP engagement. It's not expected to be full public engagement. This is really just a guiding team.
Right.
And there'll be lots of opportunities for specific members of the public to continue engaging along the way.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming forward, Leslie.
Good evening, everyone. Am I on? You're on. Okay, good. Thanks for letting me have my comments here today. And I'm a senior, and thank you, Cindy. Yes. There is, As Neil had said, there is a large component of seniors in our community, and they're engaged in many different aspects, and not just the Sunshine Club for recreation. There are, as Neil and I are with the Municipal Pension Retirees Plan, there's 160 of us registered in our community. We have housing, which is the Alberni Valley Seniors Housing Society. We have the Low Cost Energy, or the Low Energy Housing Society, all caring for seniors in multiple age groups. We have care homes. We've got Abbeyfield, West Haven, Rainbow Gardens, Alberni Clay Clock Continuing Care. So there's a lot of seniors and more than just recreation. We do care about housing and all sorts of components in our community. So I hope, and then maybe Scott can answer my next question, is who are the representatives on this team and what categories are they in? I only see 2 names up there.
Thank you. I'll just read them out. We have Marissa Bennett, young adult representative, and she is with North Island College. We have Ellen Frood, social sector, and she's with Sage Haven. We have Robert Gunn, environmental sector, with Alberni Climate Action. Lenora King, environment sector, Alberni Valley Transition Town Society. Dion Hopkins, member of the public. Melissa Martin, culture sector, Community Arts Council of the Alberni Valley. We have Rihanna Miller, culture and economic sectors with Community Futures. Craig Summers, social sector, Port Alberni Association for Community Living. Kevin Somerville, economic sector with the Sand Group. Lil Tardif, public member. Chris Washington, economic sector with the Uptown Merchants Association. Len Watts, Force the Shot First Nations, land use planning. Sarah Williams, representing youth from SD70, and then there is a member of Hoopachasit First Nations, and then potentially 2 youth that are not listed here.
Okay. As part of the application, was there an age category that you had to state your age?
We did ask them to give their age range, so we could, again, try and get that even demographic across the spectrum. Yes.
Okay. Since housing is a major part of the OCP, is there a housing component person on this particular team?
There isn't a specialized housing expert in this. That'll be really for our consultants and our staff to bring forward to the general community on the variety of housing that we need to continue on. So one of the early categories we're going to be talking about is growth scenarios. You know, we with some background work we've done, we know population that we expect to potentially see over the next 20 years. How are we going to grow? Like, are we going to continue just as at current status with greenfill? Are we going to do infill? Or are we going to go in between? So we're in those early stages of that. And housing will need to be a much wider discussion with the entire community. And so, no, we didn't specifically ask for a housing expert here because housing means a lot to a lot of different people, and you need to provide a spectrum of housing choice going forward. So, no, we didn't feel a housing expert was necessary at this particular time.
Okay. Okay. Next question.
I will just add that we do have housing providers specifically represented on this committee, so.
Housing providers?
Housing providers, yes.
Which one is that?
Sage Haven is one example.
Okay.
And Mr. Summers from PACL.
Yeah, and I would also say Mr. Hopkins is a realtor and has done development in the community as well. So a lot of them bring, like I said, a variety of life experiences.
Yeah, and Robert Guns with Abbeyfield. Yep, good. Next question. How are you engaging the public in this process? Just because it wasn't laid out in your document here.
In this early part of the process, we will, in June, be having some open houses and some general pop-up sessions in the community. Later in the fall, when as we've proceeded with with policy work and draft documents, there'll be additional sets of public opportunities for comment and engagement.
Okay, so you're looking at open house at like Echo Center or something like that?
But we haven't set an exact date or location yet, but that's something we will be doing in the short order.
Yeah. The reason I bring that up, and you're bringing up pop-ups, I remember when it was the key to key and there was pop-ups going up everywhere, and gee, I never came across them, so it was rather difficult to be engaged. So would like to see good communications with our community on that. So thank you very much for answering my questions.
Thank you. Are there other questions from members of the public? And this doesn't have to be questions, it could just be input as well. This is just informal opportunity for input on this piece of the OCP. Okay, seeing none. Did we vote on the motion to receive? I don't think so. Okay, thank you. It was moved and seconded. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. So we have no correspondence today. We'll move on to new business, and item number 1 is the travel policy. We'll go to our Director of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in the agenda today, we have a report that addresses the travel policy. This policy has been in place for over 8 years now, and in large part it is fine, but there is the updating that needs to regularly occur. So what the recommended policy is in front of you today is to provide that automatic updates, and what we've referenced is the provincial travel policy and their rates, so that when that's updated every April 1st, it reflects a change that would be coming to the city policy and rates that are paid. So just trying to streamline the process. Essentially, all of Section 2 of the current policy is now within the new policy, but it's just the reference to the rates that were provided by the province, and this is a practice that has been done in other municipalities and regional districts. I believe the ACRD is still referencing the same rates within their policy. With that, there is some policies that we've seen that might reference the CRA rates as far as kilometers. With those rates, those are the highest rates that are allowable without becoming taxable. So the intent is to kind of give that threshold for the highest rate in Canada for kilometerage. Whereas the provincial rate is lower and at 61 cents per kilometer right now, and your CRA rate is probably about 68 cents per kilometer. So that's one difference that has been investigated. I have seen some policies that reference that amount, but the recommendation sits with the 61. Now the increases that we'd see, and this is a worst case scenario, would be probably around that $10,000 range as far as increases. But this is to be fair to reflect the cost of travel and doing business on the city work. So we're trying to reflect a policy now that not only reflects fairness, but provides the ability to have those regular updates without having to go through the administration process. And I'm looking at council as far as any need to provide input. If there's anything that the committee would like to make a recommendation to go to council, I'm open to listening to that for that.
Thank you very much. Are there questions or comments from council? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Director McGifford, I read the whole thing, so I can't point out exactly where it is, but there was a requirement to, of course, be as cost-effective as possible in travel. I wonder if there is any policy or practice or directive indicating that any individual traveling should consider rental vehicles cost versus taking their own car and their mileage cost and choose the one that's most economical.
Madam Chair, I believe that's in the policy. When we look at the policy, Let me just back it up here. So local transportation, where you could use a fleet vehicle, or you could use a rental car, taxi, bus, or rapid transit. If these are expenses that are more reflective of best value, then we most definitely would encourage that. One reference that we could look at is if you are traveling via vehicle versus flying, you have to do the comparison to see what is the best, and we can make a provision within the policy to ensure that that is clearly identified, that you have the expenditure reimbursed based on the lowest of the two. So, and that's I believe the intent in some part, but if that's not clearly identified, we will make sure that that recommendation would come back to council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. And I'm glad that that was just asked with, the word fleet came into mind right away, because when I was a councillor before, we had to go to Whistler, and rather than drive, it was cheaper for me to take the old Mazda 323 that was sitting outside, which was the by-law enforcement officer's vehicle for the weekend, and it was much cheaper for the city. So I'm glad fleet's in there. I just don't know if, and I mean, this is small potatoes, if there's a financial responsibility card needed, or if counselors are on the insurance, that's something to look into. But yes, if there is a fleet vehicle that if, and I just say this, say there's a conference where 3 people have to go to Nanaimo, it'd be just jump in one of the fleet vehicles and go. So you're not paying for the cost of the mileage and all that, if it's a cheaper option, that's all. So I'm glad that was brought up, that fleet's an option.
We usually carpool in pretty good groups as well. I'll go to our Director of Finance.
Madam Chair, so with Councillor Mealy's point there, sometimes it might be available, but during the course of the day, our vehicles are usually in use, so it might be limited as far as that opportunity. But I mean, as we work with administrator, the CAO, we can look at any opportunities if there are fleet vehicles available, or if not, we'll do the best we can.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay. Would anybody like to read the motion? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council rescind P6 travel expense policy for employees and other authorized persons dated March 9th, 2015, and approve policy 3010-1 travel policy.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
And item number 2, purchase card policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So once again, just a policy update, with the credit card processes. So currently we have 3 credit cards for the City of Port Alberni, looking to expand that and have the administration of that policy within the CAO's purview. With that, with the changes with credit card and security and multi-factor authentication, it's very difficult for transactions to be undertaken with a group card. That is not best practice. Best practice would have someone who's accountable for that credit card undertake those transactions, and within the processes ensure that we have adherence to our policies as far as thresholds for purchase, and as far as making sure that we are accountable and making sure these are reported in a timely fashion. Current practice, there is some difficulties in getting the information from different transactions to the one AR clerk. It does take a bit of time, but what we're looking now at is just improving the policy as far as having credit cards that are administrated by the CAO and the administrator being the Director of Finance, ensuring that there is a process in place that that tracks the expenditures within the new credit card policy.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments? Seeing none. Councillor Mealy, would you like to read that one?
Sorry, I did have a question, Madam Mayor. So with this new policy, we would be looking, would the amounts change for these credit cards? Sorry.
Madam Chair, that's a great question. I didn't address that, and that's good to hear. So based on what is required for each position, we would evaluate what is needed as far as credit limits. So when we look at different purchases depending on position, as long as it's still within the thresholds within our procurement policy, those managers may make those purchases, and it would still be restricted by those thresholds. So it's a matter of operational need, and that's under the CAO directive.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to the director, are any of these expenses reportable or publicly required to be reportable? So I imagine there's a lot of things that these payment accounts could be used for. Some of them would be probably just daily expenses. Some of them may be special expenses. Is there any definition or delineation of different types of expenses that could be put on these cards that may be appropriate for public reporting?
Director of Finance.
I believe, Madam Chair, everything is available for public reporting. These are all public transactions, so the details have to be provided. Do we do individual reporting out of transactions? No, but this is information that if is requested through an FOI, that could be reported. So, but yeah, not sure if that answers.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
I'd like to make a motion then, Madam Mayor, that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council rescind credit card policy dated October 14th, 2014, and approve policy 3009-3, purchase card policy, I believe it is.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dame. Not seeing any more comments on the motion. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for that. We'll move on to bylaw enforcement policy from our Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you. Through the chair. Staff are bringing forward to you today a bylaw enforcement policy for consideration. The bylaw enforcement policy allows council to outline the goals of the city enforcement program and sets clear expectations and standards for bylaw enforcement. The goal of this policy is to achieve voluntary compliance with reasonable standards through a progressive enforcement approach involving increased education and awareness of the city's regulations. And most infractions outside of health and safety violations are identified by receiving a complaint. So this policy provides staff with a way to categorize the potential infractions into different priority groups, as well as lays out a complaint procedure, including how complaints will be responded to. Further, the policy identifies council's priority areas for the proactive type of enforcement, and these areas are in Appendix A of the policy. And since I'm coming in at the end of this policy I just started, I think I'll hand it back over to council for discussion, and Mr. Fox and Mr. Zenko are both here to answer any specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Solda first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a quick question. I noticed that vacant building bylaw is not on here, and I'm just like, we have a lot of vacant buildings in some areas of our community, and I'm wondering, should it be on here? Because I really support that.
CAO.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, if council wishes that to be a proactive enforcement following the bylaw, they can make that direction. If it was a matter of safety at a vacant building, then we would be addressing that, as that's one of the top form.
Councillor Solda.
Thank you. What I'm referring to is mainly we have some storefronts that have been vacant for a long time from absentee landlords, not necessarily living in Port Alberni, and who don't really care. They bought it for an investment, tax write-off, whatever they did, and they're empty. And I believe that we should have a policy on that.
See you.
Through the chair, with that intention, I would have to go back. It wouldn't be part of this bylaw, but we could research and bring one back if it is the will of council. I believe that it is on the previous corporate officer, Danielle's list of policies to develop. It just hasn't been brought forward to a committee of the whole at this time.
I think just for clarity, we do have a vacant building bylaw. The need was to have it updated because I think what we heard from our staff was that in its current framework, it wasn't meeting the need. And so prior to moving forward with making it a priority, we might want to look at updating it. However, I just want to echo Councillor Solda's comments. Because I do think that this is something that has been a challenge and I think a priority of not just this council, but the prior council as well, to look at a more proactive way to work with not a commercial space that happens to be vacant for a reasonably short period of time, but is maintained and taken care of, but rather some of the vacant commercial spaces that we have in our community that have been left to be run down, where we know, and we know that our economic development manager has at times been trying to get in touch with owners of these properties because they have tenants who would like to rent them and has been unsuccessful. So where we have a landlord that is not maintaining the building, not keeping it in keeping with how we would like our commercial areas to look and feel, and not making effort to lease it out or improve it, I think that certainly should be a priority area of council and reflected in this bylaw. Councillor Solda and then Councillor Patola.
And just a big thing too, the mayor is absolutely right, but there's the enforcement of it too. There hasn't been any enforcement that I'm aware of, so I would like to see more enforcement. If they're going to find, if they get the little permit that's available for them, I don't care what price that is. My main thing is enforcement. If they're going to do one offense and they're not going to answer to it, well, then let's put the fines up. That's how I look at it.
See you.
Through the chair, so we can add that into the list of in the appendix for enforcement. And now I have more clarity on the process that had happened before and why it was on the list. And we will just try to expedite that as time permits through the corporate officer for updating the policy or bylaw. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was very interested in this proposal and the policy and its wording. And I noted that this was the first time I'd seen it. And there were certainly a lot of very specific recommendations in it, such as the priorities. And I think those are all issues that council should decide on as a whole and not just take the particular recommendations as appropriate as they may be or as best practices as they may be. I think this council needs to decide for this city what priorities are, or even if we have priorities. I have a lot to say about that. But before I do, I would like to make a motion, Madam Mayor, that council refer this policy to a select committee composed of members of council, let's say 4, or 3, but let's say 4, for the purposes of providing recommendations on bylaw enforcement policies to council as a whole.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Moved and seconded. Comments on the motion? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the reasons are just all expansions on what Councillor Solda suggested, in that Councillor Solda has a priority for vacant building enforcement, one that I may agree with, but there might be others I don't agree with. And certainly the addendum or appendix that sets out what priorities there should be is one that I think could undergo ample discussion, particularly because my opinion would be that there should be no prioritizing of bylaws at all, but that if we have bylaws, those bylaws are there to be enforced. There is discretion in enforcement of bylaws, and we've received a legal opinion on that matter earlier on this year when we were discussing enforcement of bylaws with regards to the Eagles Hall. So certainly we know that at law, we bylaw enforcement officers have discretion. And as far as prioritizing, I think that that should be left within the ambit of the bylaw manager. All laws should be enforced. Some, obviously, can't be enforced all the time due to budgetary restrictions or other restrictions that occur. But to simply say that we won't enforce certain bylaws until, because ones of a higher priority are all completely dealt with, would really fetter the discretion of the bylaw officers, which is the central focus of that position. I note in reading the Ombudsman's report that was attached as a hyperlink to this report that there were a number of recommendations in there that weren't completely followed, and I think would benefit from discussion about whether they should or should not be followed. It doesn't include the appeal process that's set out at page 7. It specifically says that bylaw staff should not be fettered in exercising their own discretion. Makes a recommendation that complainants should be told of the results of the investigation, which is specifically excluded in this suggested policy. And specifically, the Ombudsman of BC says that bylaw officers should respond to all complaints. There is no indication in the Ombudsman's report about complaints that are vexatious, and having a definition of vexatious complaints causes me a concern in that it requires a finding of fact based on evidence to determine that a claim is vexatious, and that then puts the bylaw officer in a position not of just doing their job well and responding to conditions, but of actually making findings of fact where no facts yet exist. And I think that would be contrary to administrative law and fairness. So for all those reasons, although I think moving forward with a policy is a good idea, I think this policy could benefit from some discussion amongst council members. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Could I just have a repeat of what that motion was specifically, if possible? I think it was to refer the whole issue to a select committee or the policy. Councillor Patola, could you clarify?
Yes, the writing of this policy that's been suggested that's before us, page 34 of the agenda, that report and policies set out therein should be referred to the select committee.
Okay, so I just want to speak sort of to process here, I guess, that I think a select committee should not be used to take decisions and the process away from council as a whole. So I think setting priorities is council as a whole's responsibility and not a committee of 3 or 4 people. I do wholeheartedly agree that we need to have a lot more conversation about this policy before we recommend it for adoption, although I'm happy to see it coming forward, and I do think that I like the intent of it. I don't necessarily support the priorities that have been identified, but I think it's all of our responsibilities as a council to set those priorities rather than a select committee. So I don't support the motion that's been made for that reason. I'm also left somewhat confused based on comments following that motion as to whether you're intending to discuss at the select committee what we prioritize or the concept of whether or not we prioritize at all. And I think those are 2 very different discussions, and in my opinion, both discussions that should involve all of council. I do think that we should have a lot more discussion about what these priorities are, and I do personally support the suggestion that we do prioritize and that we are proactive and that we do move forward with a policy. In my opinion, I think we're not quite there yet on what those priorities are, and that could go to a select committee or it could come back to council for further discussion. It also could come back to an additional committee of the whole meeting if we request more information back from staff. And I'll go to Councillor Patola and then Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm glad that we agree that more discussion is required, and it's merely the process that's most appropriate. I don't think a select committee would be at all the wrong one. It might not be the right one, but a select committee, in my understanding, does not make decisions for council. It provides recommendations, just as this committee of the whole provides recommendations. And then the entire matter is still open to the entirety of council to decide upon. So I don't think anybody would be pirating away the ability of council to determine bylaw enforcement policy. I just thought that a select committee being smaller and meeting in a committee basis that is not making decisions is a much less wieldy type of tool to be using.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I echo the comments made on both sides. I think our bylaw department deserves a great deal of attention in regards to what it's evolved into over the last decade, and needs to be much more solution-based and not as enforcement-based, in my feeling. That there's a great many issues that deserve our attention to do with the bylaws department, and I would appreciate seeing, you know, a notice of motion being put forward in that regard that we can, you know, look at and study and reflect on, and then come up with proposals to address it. As it stands, I'm satisfied with this proposed motion, not the one that's made by Councillor Patola, but the proposed motion that's on our agenda. I'm satisfied with that for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a point of clarification on from the motion, the mover of the motion is, would your intent to, through you to Councillor Patola, is your intent for this select committee to provide recommendation to the committee of the whole, then to council, or directly to council?
I have no preference either way. There would be no intention. I would think that in either event, it makes no difference to me in either event, and I just picked the subcommittee because of the ease and nature of the smaller committee. Certainly, it could come back to committee of the whole, it could come back to council. Either way, it's for council to end up making the final decision.
Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate that. I would like to see, if we do to go to a select committee, it comes back to committee of the whole, so that the public can at least have their say rather than go right to council. But either way, either that happens or it comes to another committee of the whole meeting. I'd like to see it once again, so the public can have their say. That's all.
So where and if that would be an amendment, that would be a friendly amendment that it clarifies that it returns to the committee of the whole.
I think that's fine to accept as a friendly amendment. Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I feel like this ultimately becomes more exclusionary than it does. I understand the intent behind it, but I feel like that is somewhat the purpose of the committee of the whole. And reducing from 7 to 4 to me doesn't. I'm not confident that that solves an issue, and I think that I would personally, I think that probably all of us would like to be included in that conversation. I certainly would, and I don't know how we would choose the 4. So my concern would be the 3 feeling excluded. I'm not sure, I'm convinced that there's a good purpose behind that. So I wouldn't support this as it is. I would rather see this continue to be elaborated on in a committee of the whole personally.
Councillor Solda.
Oops, sorry. When I look at the bylaws that are presented here, there's so many bylaws that we have in the city that are not addressed, and priorities in the eye of the beholder, whoever's at the time doing an infraction on a bylaw. I look at, we have businesses that are not in the commercial zone, and it's something else. We have animal bylaw with cats, how many dogs, cats, chickens, roosters, et cetera, in our community, that there's infractions. And it used to be a big topic at one point in our community. We have hedges, when people are talking about hedges and fences, and there's a lot there. So where do we make our priority? Do we list it as number 1, 2, or 3? And I think we need to have that discussion. This is just minor to me. I mean, they're important, But again, it's to who at the time.
Thank you, Councillor Solda. I have a suggestion. I think when I look at this Appendix A, it's not really representative of conversations we've had as a council. Some of the things on here I think are critical, and some things I think are not necessarily council priorities to make them the priority enforcement areas. So I would like to see, because we have had bylaw discussion, we have had discussion, I think in our strategic plan, we specifically talk about buildings that are used in contrary to zoning in commercial areas. That's a specific item out of our strategic plan. So I think what we all want here is probably more discussion on what this policy looks like and what the priorities are. And I wonder if an appropriate next step would be to bring back a supplemental report that is driven by our council strategic plan. Everything that is outside of council strategic plan, but it's still a priority, is going to be day-to-day safety, like is going to get enforced regardless, as just a matter of the business of the city needing to continue on. But the priority areas really should be set from council's strategic plan. Since that was just put out in public, I can think of quite a few areas here where we probably could bring back recommendations that are driven by the plan or supported by the plan. Bring that back for discussion at an additional committee of the whole, then have more conversation about if we've missed something, if what we put in our plan is, in keeping with what is going into this policy, et cetera. So we do have a motion right now to refer it to a select committee. I think I understand the intent of that, and I wonder if this does get to possibly the same spot, and if it doesn't, then we may be able to still, if we brought it back to an additional committee of the whole and council felt like we needed more in-depth, detailed conversation, we certainly could at that point create a select committee of council to continue that work. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just on, not on the motion itself, just on the policy, I agree with my colleague, Councillor Patola. You can have priorities in the end. They're all on the books and they should all be enforced. I guess my question at this time, we do have our bylaw enforcement officer here, and I don't want to put him on the spot, definitely, but I've always been under the impression it's a complaint-driven process, that the bylaw enforcement officer and our staff is not going out looking for stuff to do, because there's just so many. Maybe if I could be so bold to ask the bylaw enforcement officer, is that still the way it runs in the bylaw enforcement? And the reason why I say that, like I said, it's always been complaint driven on my end, and the stack of papers I've always been told is about that high. And so I don't think it's necessarily like the policy and our priorities. It's really just the stack of papers and the priorities that it's in his hands. So
I just want to note, though, that that's the exact intent of the policy, is for council to set what those priorities are. And that there are going to be safety issues that continue to be enforced regardless of whether we set them as priorities specifically or not. But when the bylaw enforcement department was drastically expanded 6 or 7 years ago, and it was like times 6 expanded, it was in order to be able to be proactive, to go out and target areas that were driven by council as priorities. We never ended up getting to that as a result of probably increased call volume. And so this is intending to probably just bring us kind of back to that original point of why we created this department in the first place, or not created, but took it from, I think, 1 1/2 time to 4 or something like that. Mark.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Mealy, yes, you're absolutely right. For the most part, we do respond to complaints. Where that, I guess, trades over is when things happen on public property that somebody may not necessarily make a complaint about, so like traffic-related calls, those kinds of things. If somebody's doing something in a park that maybe nobody witnessed, but it's clearly not right, our bylaw officers can respond to that without a complaint. So those are the type of things that, in the public interest, where it's not happening on public property, it's affecting public property, then we would certainly respond without a complaint.
CEO.
Through the chair, and also the other parts that are enforced by bylaw currently that I discussed with our corporate officer are, if the bylaw officer is driving by a property and sees an offense happening, we'll take action. And sometimes that takes away from the other work that they're doing because of that action. Now, it depends on how that action comes to their attention, as Mr. Zinko pointed out. But that is what spurred this policy on to come here. It was an area that caused a number of comments to come to council about hedges, fence heights, etc. And we did actively enforce those complaints when they came, which caused a lot of discussion. So as administration, we took the opportunity to bring forward a policy to get further direction from council on that, where I think there was some varying opinions on council. So I'm glad to hear this conversation moving forward and how it proceeds. I'm more than willing. I'm at council's disposal, and I'm sure Mr. Zinko is very intently listening to all the discussion on and how we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Mealy.
I just want to suggest a supplementary on that. I kind of knew the answer, but I believe since we're in a meeting and it's on YouTube and that, I think there's a lot of people that still have questions on how bylaw enforcement is run in this town. And I think it's just important to get that answer out there. So I appreciate staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, so we do have a motion currently to refer this to a select committee of council, 3 or 4 councillors. We'll look back at whatever was said here. Select committee of council that would then come back to a committee of the whole meeting. Are there any further comments on that? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So here's the motion. The other option is just to come back to a committee of the whole meeting with this. Would that be the only other option? Not the only other option, but the other logical option.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one of the options. The recommended motion, of course, was, or not recommended, but the written motion was just to bring this to a council meeting. I would say, based on the conversation we've had, it looks like we do need to have more conversation about what the priorities are and probably the policy. So if this passes, it will go to select committee. If not, any member of council will be welcome to make a motion that it come back to a committee of the whole. Okay, seeing no comments on the motion to refer to a select committee of council, all in favor? Opposed? Defeated? Councillor Mealy.
I make a motion that we refer this to the next committee of the whole meeting, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Solda. And Council, I always like to just ask that when we are bringing something back to a committee of the whole meeting, that we make any specific requests of staff for information we're looking for. So I personally would like this to come back with reference to our strategic plan, any initiatives driven by our strategic plan that could have a bylaw lens on them to form those priorities. Does council support that? And are there any other pieces of information that we'd like to bring? And I'll go to Councillor Mealy first.
No, I would consider that a friendly amendment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Douglas?
As simple as it could be, I'd like to see an analysis of the growth of the bylaw department over the last, say, 8 years, or maybe 10 years, just so we can get a grasp of what it was and what it's become in terms of budget and personnel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also friendly.
Thank you. Any other pieces of information council would like? Councillor Solda.
Well, Madam Mayor, we've had a really great discussion this evening, and I think staff should have been able to pick up some of the discussion and be able to come back. We're waiting for an empty building. You're going to come back to us, I believe. And there's been other discussions that comments we have made, and that should open up a window anyways. I'm just bringing that forward.
It will and it will not, though, and we have to be cautious with that because it specifically is not direction to staff if one member of council asks for something. So that's why I'm asking if there's support from council for additional items to be included when this is brought back. And I think that our strategic plan does specifically speak to the vacant building and contrary to zoning building issue. That might be an additional report just because it is a bylaw that needs to be updated, but I'm sure it will frame part of this. If not, Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Gets to be quite a long and lengthy motion that we're sending this back for, but I would like to know what what bylaws we have that are simply not useful because they, A, do not address a public concern, or B, are drafted in a manner that is simply not enforceable. Because and I'll say the reason is because it seems that most of this discussion comes forward from bylaw officers who are put in a position to enforce a bylaw that is poorly written, and there's no desire to enforce it. And again, I have to say, if there's a law, it should be enforced. If you're not going to enforce it, there should not be a law. We are not in a position to determine ourselves what should and shouldn't be enforced at our whims. And we have in the past done exactly that. And we are not at all following our strategic plan, which sets out that we should have a safe and livable community. If we are individually picking at a political level which laws are enforced, discretion is for the bylaw enforcement office.
Except for where it's overridden by council policy. So we know we are permitted to do this. So some of the statements you just made are not correct. I just want to note, though, that it's not a friendly amendment. And so certainly, I think that's a different issue, a different report, and one that I would support us bringing forward and requesting. But I think a full review of our bylaws is not going to be within the scope of something that could be brought back to the next committee of the whole. I think it's a bigger initiative. Councillor Mealy.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, point of clarification then to Councillor Patola. Are you asking the bylaw enforcement officer to give his recommendations on the bylaws that he would consider not enforceable or no longer useful? Is that what I'm getting at? Sorry, before I decide on my friendly amendment.
That's correct.
So if it's just a recommendation for Mr. Zanko to give us an idea of any bylaws off the top of his head or through a report, I would consider that a friendly amendment.
It is not a friendly amendment to have a full review of bylaws. That is a completely different scope of work and not something that can be achieved by our next committee of the whole meeting. I want to just go to our CAO.
Thank you, and through the chair, I just also want to clarify that the manager of community safety is different than the bylaw officers. The bylaw officers that are out enforcing in the streets is not that manager position. So if we are going to get something just to clarify for public and council, that it would be the manager of community safety that would be taking input from the bylaw officers and from the rest of administration, but we would come back with a fulsome report on that. I just wanted to clarify the difference between the two.
Thank you. And in speaking to whether it's a friendly amendment or not, this is I would say, a large additional scope of work. There are people on this council who are not going to support that work being done alongside this. So it's not considered a friendly amendment if there are councillors who would like to have the opportunity to vote against it. If you'd like to make that as an additional motion after this, I think we absolutely could bring that forward. Are there any other items of information that council would like to have included in the report? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, though, if it be not a friendly amendment, it be an amendment that can be voted on. And so if anyone would like to second that, I would make that motion to amend.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Solda. Comments on the amendment? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As long as the work's being done either way, but if it's a separate motion, I think I'm fine either way, but I understand why it would be a separate motion, so.
Thank you. And I just want to comment that this is something that did come up last term of council to really go into details on which of our bylaws are working, which are enforceable, which are not, which are irrelevant, which never get used, which ones are maybe not achieving what we intended them to achieve. That was, I believe, in our strategic plan. And as a result of the scope of that report, we never ended up getting to it. It was a very challenging report to actually put together. It was a large scope of work. So I don't I'm going to personally vote against the amendment for that reason. I think that what we're trying to do here is bring forward an improvement to the flow of and effectiveness of our bylaw department. I do think that that's important work to be done. I don't want to stop this work from being done or slow this work down as a result of needing to open up the entire department and every bylaw that we have. Councillor Dame and then Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. I don't know if this might save us some time, but if there was any interest or willingness to withdraw the amendment, but I think if I could, I'm not positive, but I think I would request that it be severed anyways. So which I think has to be, right? No, I think we, yeah. So that's where we're going to arrive regardless.
Yeah, so we are, because we have the opportunity to vote on the amendment, council does have the opportunity to vote against that work being included right now. When we had the sever or vote separately or whatever discussion last time, it was they were read together. So council needed the opportunity to sever it. So I think we'll effectively get to the same place at this point, but thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to say, if Councillor Patola is requesting a full review of every bylaw on our books, that would take a tremendous amount of resources of staff time, and our bylaw department is already overworked. They don't have enough personnel in that department to do what they're doing now. So if you're wanting a full review of the bylaw department, let's put our money where our mouth is and fund that department in order to do the work that you're requesting.
Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in response, although, Madam Mayor, we are all entitled to our own opinions, I think an assertion that I was wrong in what I said is merely an opinion and not a fact, because my education and background tells me that I was not wrong in what I said. So in any event, that's not an issue, but certainly with rules of decorum, we shouldn't be telling people they're wrong by opinion. With regards to my Councillor Haggard's comments, apparently the comments of Madam Mayor have pointed out that in fact this review has been done last. It was requested. So certainly it's something that is not beyond the scope of council and not beyond the scope of the city. The point is, we should be saving money. I read this policy to prioritize enforcement is a way to deal with really bad bylaws that don't do what they're supposed to do by putting a Band-Aid over top of them and then ignoring the underlying problem, which is really bad bylaws that need to be rewritten. Policy on enforcement simply fetters the discretion of the bylaw department as it is. The bylaw department can continue acting in the way they've always acted, as they are traditionally entitled to act, with discretion on enforcement. That's where the discretion lies. Now, council can certainly change a bylaw, and that's what I'm advocating we should be doing, is rewriting the bylaws where they need to be changed and not wasting the time and money in developing policies that don't achieve the goal that we're really trying to achieve.
Thank you, noted, and I think everyone understands that. I think as well, everyone here is looking for the most effective bylaws, recognizing, however, that's a big job. It's not going to happen overnight, and we're certainly not going to update all of our bylaws right away. So I think this is a combination of what we're all trying to get to, in my opinion. Councillor Mealy for last comment, and then we'll go to a vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So on the amendment, because it is attached to this and it would increase the scope of time needed, I'll be voting against the amendment, but I will support Councillor Patola in a separate motion.
Thank you. So on the amendment to add this specific work requested, does anyone need clarity on what it is we're requesting? Wonderful. Councillor Dame, clarity?
Yeah, thank you. Could we hear the original motion before we vote? No? Okay, well, hey, let's go for it then.
So right now we are only voting on, not on the original, but only on the amendment to request the more in-depth bylaw review. And then we'll go back to what we're at. Thank you. Okay, so on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion defeated. So now we have the original motion, which is to refer this back, or to defer this to our next committee of the whole meeting specifically, and to include the additional reports that were added as friendly amendments, and not additional reports, but additional information, how it pertains to our strategic plan. And the other one was on the scope of changes that have happened in terms of staffing, specifically in the bylaw department. Any other changes councillors would like to make to this motion? Seeing none, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make a notice of motion that I will bring a motion to have the administration present a report on the state of our bylaws and a plan for updating them so they are effective and enforceable.
Thank you. So notice of motion doesn't need to be seconded. Just point of clarity though, would you like that to come to a committee of the whole, or would you like that to come to, probably more effective to come to a council meeting, which would then come to a committee of the whole, the actual report?
The report should probably come to committee of the whole so that it can be discussed before it goes to council. And I think our CAO, if I remember correctly, would like dates for return put on these types of motions. I'm not sure when the next convenient committee of the whole meeting would be for that, considering, well, for the notice of motion, it should just be the next committee of the whole. And then when we get to that, actually making the motion, we can put a date on it.
Thank you. So my point of clarity was that you could have this as a notice of motion on our next council agenda so that council can vote on whether or not we want that report, which would then, the report would come to a committee of the whole. So it just will get the discussion a little sooner on if we have that report requested or not.
Fair enough.
So if everyone's good with that coming to our next council agenda and notice of motion, it doesn't need to be voted on. Okay. Anything else people want to talk about here? Councillor Douglas.
I'd just like to take the opportunity to compliment Councillor Mealy on the fantastic and extremely expressive jersey that he's wearing tonight.
Thank you to both. And there's probably not tickets left for Game 3 and 4.
I believe on the black market online. I believe there's a couple of people selling them, but that's
I actually did see people black market selling them today, so that's a thing now. Okay, moving on to, we're not finished our agenda yet. We have question period, so this is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council. Mr. Anderson.
Takes only twice. Just for clarification, because I thought you were going, I don't believe, could be wrong, that a committee of the whole can make reference to anything to a committee of the whole. And I think that's what you clarified, if I got it right, Mayor Minions, that it should be go to the city council meeting, who will then refer to a committee of the whole.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. One thing I want to bring up, and this has been brought forward on many occasions, not by myself, but certainly been on my mind. Occasionally I go to the public crowd, the Dog Mountain Brewery, to look around to see what's going on around there. That's the sole purpose. And I still see the fascia on the racquetball club, nothing has changed. Could you update me on that briefly? And I can't help but think, certainly in another issue, that it appears anyway, no, it is a case in one case, that certain businesses or people get liberties that are not always extended to the rest of the community. And this one has been going on now for a long time, and it adds to the eyesore of that corner. And it's a shame that a business like the pub there, who does such a great job of maintaining and renovating that building, wherever you look around, you see nothing but devastation into buildings that need to be upgraded. So if you could comment and just let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I'm not sure, CAO, if you're able to answer that. I know it was a development permit issue. I'm not sure if it's a bylaw issue as well specifically. CAO?
Yeah, through the chair, I have heard about the issues. I believe there's multiple, and I couldn't comment on any of them directly at this time. I'm not up to speed fully on that. I'm not sure if yeah, okay. Okay.
Thank you.
On the particular racquetball club, a development permit was issued by council and subsequently a building permit was issued. I do know they had a mistake with some lower windows, but I agree, it has been taking an extraordinarily long time. Staff will follow up with that property owner again.
Thank you. And I guess for follow-up to that, that building permit, I assume, is still active. They take 2 years to expire, 2 years? So still active. So while there is an active building permit, I guess, does our bylaw allow us to enforce if there's not movement, or if a building remains in a certain state, or if there's an active permit, is that property owner effectively okay? And that might be too complicated of a question for today. Don't feel like you need to speculate, but maybe for a future meeting if you're not able to answer today.
While there is an active building permit, you're correct. They have 2 years. Work did begin, but there has been very inactive over the last several months. There wouldn't be a mechanism within the building permit unless a certain amount of time expires, then the permit would be null and void. Other bylaws would need to be looked at for potential enforcement.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Mealy, and I just did want to add that I know that council has requested an update on that property several times. Some have come to council, and certainly we could request another one come to council on if there are any options, because I think we're all unhappy with the current state of that building. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just on a personal note, I did see some siding work starting on the front lower right corner by some workers the other day. So if there is a little bit of siding work, it is undertaken, I guess. I don't know how far I'll drive down there after the meeting, so.
Thank you.
And just the one thing, it's certainly more than a few months that this has been, like I'd say it's getting close to that 2-year period, if not over. But at least close. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on forward.
Hi, Leslie Valerius again. I'm wanting to speak on the new procedures bylaw, but not sure if this is the scope of it. It's regarding the taping of the regular council meetings and committee of the whole meetings. As a member of public, I don't always attend the meetings, but I do watch on video. So I have a request. I've noticed that the videotaping at regular meetings and committee of the whole meetings, they show close-ups of individuals, and then they also pull back and do a full view. Having a full view provides a better perspective on the proceedings, mayor council reactions to various topics, and interactions with the director of corporate services, the CAO, staff, and the public. My request would be that the recorder be pulled back to span the entire council who sees votes for or against a motion, noting that the minutes do not contain who is voting for or against the motions. So this feature, I think, would enhance public viewing. So that's just a request. I hope you're able to do that. My second one is on the P-card policy that Mr. McGifford brought forward tonight. And I think it could be enhanced with some additional information that would benefit the public, mayor, and council, and be better understood by staff and their employees. Is to create a matrix that would show the position of the people who are getting the purchase cards. So the example of the CAO, directors, a charge hand, or a stores keeper. In the past, the charge hands used to be able to have a field purchase order. So, and also show the P-card limit. Some might get 5,000, some might get 10,000, some I don't know what. And then what they're able to purchase. Are they just able to purchase goods or goods and services or just services? And also to somehow incorporate in that matrix what they're able to purchase on a day-to-day activity versus a project, your capital projects, for example. And also if they're able to purchase during a disaster, because that's, who knows when that might happen again. So it would provide a short and concise visual to the public through the policy if that would be able to be incorporated. And the matrix also provides information about levels of responsibility, as this may affect an employee's classification for higher pay. So I would like to see that included. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that feedback. That's great. Joseph, come on forward.
Hi, my name is Joseph Laskosik, and I just have a couple of quick questions. One I have is on the participants of the community representative team. You did a little on here, you showed who they were. Is that available online so you can go and read about a little bit about the person? The
Yes,
individuals?
thank you. It is included in our agenda for tonight. So on the city's website, you will find that full report.
Thank you. I didn't look at pre to this, so I wasn't sure. And the second question is regarding the change to the agenda or the council meeting procedures, which was voted on last meeting, which had to do with public input being transferred over to the committee of the whole meeting rather than the council meeting, and question period would still be allowed. I was informed that it's possible, and I'd like to know how to go about doing this, that you can actually request that one of those, if there's something that comes up on the agenda at the council meeting, that I don't know if you'd have to do it in writing beforehand, or you could do it right before the meeting, where you bring up to a council meeting that be forwarded to a committee of the whole meeting, rather than dealt with at the council meeting. And that would allow opportunity then if there's for more public input on a certain subject. So how would you go about doing that? Like if I mentioned it to I'll just, whoever, one of the
Pick a
council members,
counselor.
there you go. And if I mention that to him, is he obligated then to bring that up as I have a request?
No.
That this,
So, and that's probably stemming from my comment I made at the last meeting, which was that, we can allow members of the public to speak at any time we want. If we choose to, it just takes a council motion. Anything also can be referred back to a committee of the whole if we would like as well. It can be deferred to a future meeting. We can do whatever we want in that sense. So I think the approach there, if a member of the public felt that something needed to be brought back to a committee of the whole, further discussion, or deferred to a future council meeting, the request would just be to a member of council to bring that up. It's not a requirement that a member of council bring that up, but it would be a request to say, I think this needs to go back, do you agree? And Councillor Mealy may say, yeah, I think it does need to go back, and make that motion, then council would have the opportunity to debate it and vote on it. So as you know from attending regular council meetings, we don't have to read the motions that are written as suggestions on the agenda. And so if we want to go a different way and send it back sometimes to committee of the whole, or back to a different process, or defer it forward and not make a decision at this point, then we're able to do that. So that would be, it wouldn't be that we have to bring it up. It would be that we could if we chose to, and having that conversation with a member of council may get you there.
may get you there, but there's no guarantee on it, right? Exactly.
No guarantee, because
No
we have to
guarantee.
remember that
And you
the
have to vote
intent of
on
a
it.
council meeting is
Right.
to conduct the business of council.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. Good. It's just more where there's items that may concern the public a bit more, and to hear more from the public would be nice. And it would be great if we had a chance to vote on it, and we had enough people here say, we would like to see it forward, because we would like to bring it up in greater detail. So that would be fantastic, but that's not the case. But thank you again for that.
Thank you, Joseph. Would any other members of the public like to ask questions? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. All in favor? Carried, thank you.